Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Indianapolis, Indiana, May 1st, 2019. Andrew Adams, Bradley Jacobs, and Sabrina Bell were 3 circuit court judges in the state of Indiana. All 3 of them had driven 100 miles to attend the state's annual Spring Judicial College in Indianapolis. The event is a 3-day conference for judicial officers. But what's interesting is these 3 judges went to Indianapolis the night before. They only drove about 100 miles. You can easily cover that distance in less than 90 minutes. Why couldn't they wait until the day of the conference to go? Why the rush? You ever wonder what these judges and other professionals and bureaucrats do at these conferences, and why they always claim that these events are drop-dead boring, and yet they're always the first ones to make time to go no matter what? Clearly, they're very eager to attend these conferences, and these judges showed everyone why. First, after they arrived in town on April 30th, the 3 judges met for drinks at their hotel. And then, a little after midnight, they all decided to go to a nearby bar and drank more with another judge who happened to be there. So you have 4 judges in all sitting around getting drunk. But even that wasn't enough drinking for them. Around 3:00 a.m., the 4 judges decided to go to a strip club. Red Garter was the name of it, for more drinks. And yes, the female judge, Sabrina Bell, went there with them. In fact, this is what she was wearing at 3:00 a.m. She's not dressed like a sitting judge in town for a professional conference. She's dressed like a party girl looking for a frat house. This is why these bureaucrats and lawyers are always so eager and jolly in the behind to go to these boring conferences. They weren't busy reviewing law journals or going over the latest legislation or talking about judicial nominees. They're just sitting around getting drunk and partying. So Sabrina Bell and 3 other judges were out drinking and looking for a strip club to hang out at. But in this case, Red Garter was closed. So the 4 drunk judges decided to get something to eat instead. Luckily for them, there was a White Castle on the corner. One of the 4 judges, William Dawkins, went into the restaurant while Adams, Jacobs, and Bell stayed outside chatting in front of the place. That was when 2 men in a blue SUV, Brandon Kaiser and Alfredo Vasquez, passed by in front of the store, seemingly to go through the drive-thru. One of the 2 men in the SUV shouted something out the window at Bell, who responded by giving them the finger. This led to the 2 men stopping and getting out of their vehicle. A profane verbal argument soon turned physical. Now, Judges Adams and Jacobs are both former Marines, so not only did they know better than this as attorneys, but they also knew better than this as former soldiers. Anyway, Adams and Jacobs may have been drunk, but apparently not too drunk to put a whipping on Vasquez and Kaiser, so since the brawl wasn't going the way that Vasquez and Kaiser thought it would, Kaiser pulled a gun and shot Adams in the stomach. He then shot Jacobs in the chest twice. After that, Kaiser and Vasquez fled the scene. Both Jacobs and Adams were taken to the hospital in critical condition. Sabrina Bell, on the other hand, who had taken part in the melee, was totally unhurt. Here she is in the video talking to the local thug patrol, acting hysterical, a drama queen loving the attention. She can be seen saying, "I feel this was my fault." And what does she have to say for herself? She told police, "I'm not denying that I said something or egged it on, because I drink. I fully acknowledge that I drink and get mouthy and I'm fiery and I'm feisty, but if I would have ever thought for a second that they were going to fight or that guy had a gun on him, I would never. Keep in mind, she said that because police informed her they had video of the incident, and it showed that she had been the one who flipped off the 2 men, which set the violent incident in motion, and she was also involved in the melee. Judge Adams' blood alcohol content was 0.157%, while Jacobs was 0.13%. In the state of Indiana, anything over 0.08% is illegal to drive. Interestingly enough, Judge Sabrina was never tested for her blood alcohol content at all. While the manhunt for the 2 assailants was ongoing, the white media and Indiana legal community were singing the praises of the 2 judges who were wounded. In fact, as the Courier-Journal reported, Indiana Chief Justice Loretta Rush visited with both judges and their families and expressed the support of the entire judicial branch. She said, "Our judges across the state are heartbroken to learn of this violent act against our colleagues. We send our prayers for a speedy recovery for both Judge Jacobs and Judge Adams, and our love and support to their families and the Clark County community." Police canvassed the area and were able to identify who the assailants were. They were both located and arrested a few days after the shootings. arrested, but not charged. Because, as you ought to know by now, immunity from the law is the core of white supremacy, so prosecutors declined to bring charges against the two men, claiming additional investigation must be completed before we can make a charging decision. And with that, the two were allowed to go, at least for now. The white media was confused by this, especially because police refused to let anyone see the surveillance video of the incident. As you can guess, there was good reason for that. Anyway, prosecutors finally decided that something needed to be done, if only for optics' sake, so on June 28th, a grand jury indicted Kaiser and Vasquez. Vasquez was hit with 7 charges, Kaiser faced 14, though none of the charges had anything to do with either attempted murder or attempted homicide or anything along those lines. It was mostly aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, possessing a weapon without a license, that kind of thing. The grand jury, however, also indicted Judge Adams. He got hit with 2 counts of battery resulting in moderate injury, both felonies, 2 counts each of battery resulting in bodily injury and battery, and 1 count of disorderly conduct. All of those were misdemeanors. The grand jury had the opportunity to indict Judge Jacobs, but ultimately declined to. No charges were ever brought against Sabrina Bell, so a grand jury never even got to hear that one. And what else didn't happen? The police refused to make the video of the incident public, even at this date. On September 9th, Judge Adams took a plea deal, pleading guilty to misdemeanor battery. He got a suspended sentence. No jail time, no probation. Eventually, disciplinary charges were filed against all 3 of these lawless judges by the Indiana Commission on Judicial Qualifications. The Indiana Supreme Court, which I assume includes Chief Justice Loretta Rush, suspended all 3 of them without pay. As the court put it, respondents' actions were not merely embarrassing on a personal level, they discredited the entire Indiana judiciary. Jacobs and Bell were suspended for 30 days, Adams was suspended for 60. In October 2019, Alfredo Vasquez pleaded guilty to 1 count of misdemeanor battery and was sentenced to 180 days of home detention and a year of probation. By the way, I think this is a good time to mention that Brandon Kaiser and Alfredo Vasquez are related. Kaiser is Vasquez's uncle. This little factoid didn't get too much attention at all from the white media outlets that covered the story, and from what I found, there was no mention of this before Vasquez made his plea deal. So for the half-wits who wondered why Vasquez wasn't initially charged and why he got such a light sentence, now you know. Anyway, in the meanwhile, Brandon Kaiser was claiming self-defense in early 2020, and we all know the pandemic brought the courts to a crawl, but that's not to say that nothing happened with this case. Judge Adams ran for re-election but was defeated. Jacobs ran unopposed and held on to his seat, of course. As for Sabrina Bell, she had been elected to office in 2018, so she wasn't even up for re-election until 2022. But, as it turns out, she wouldn't make it that far. In a story that I also posted on my Twitter feed, Judge Sabrina Bell is no longer a judge. On April 12th of this year, her ex-husband had come by to pick up their children for his scheduled visit. Sabrina Bell started a verbal argument with him and then struck him in the face. Gee, that sounds kind of familiar now, don't it? Sabrina Bell's the kind of person who loves to keep conflict and fights going. To her, that's cute. Deputies confirmed through Bell's 2 children that the battery incident had happened, and she was arrested and charged. The Indiana Supreme Court suspended her without pay, again, and on July 25th, Sabrina Bell entered into an agreement with Indiana's Commission on Judicial Qualifications, in which she agreed to relinquish her law license for 150 days, to resign from office, and to never seek nor accept a judicial office in the state of Indiana for the rest of her life. Which means, of course, she still has the ability to practice law, she just can't be a judge. In September, Brandon Kaiser was convicted on 7 of the 8 felony counts against him, no surprise. But of course, as I mentioned before, none of those charges included attempted murder or attempted manslaughter or anything like that. He's set to be sentenced on October 21st. But something else to consider. Ex-Judge Adams is a Democrat. Both Sabrina Bell and Brad Jacobs are Republicans. So the culture of corrupt judges, carousing, and getting into drunken brawls is a bipartisan affair. And as for the video of the violent incident, police only released it after Brandon Kaiser was convicted. This video destroys the lie about a certain demographic loving law and order. And it also demonstrates what black people have said all along, that the white media and the government hides and conceals images of white people committing crimes while making sure that the news always leads with black people behaving badly. Even if the story is days old, they don't mind, they'll just repeat it anyway. Even if the story is proven to be false, the white media never leads with the report of a black person being found not guilty or exonerated of a crime that the white media falsely claimed they committed. This is about image crafting, manufacturing a racial narrative, and using lies, in this case lies by omission, to substantiate the narrative. These judges are not the only such examples. They're just the ones whose behavior was so egregious that it couldn't be concealed, at least not totally. Judges routinely break laws and don't get punished. That was certainly the case here, because you have never heard of 3 judges from, say, Detroit, or Chicago, or New Orleans, or any other black enclave getting into drunken shootout brawls like this. You've never heard of such a thing. If the white media thought that they could counter-program with such a claim like that and say, well, there were these 3 black judges who did the same thing, they would have, but they couldn't. That video wasn't kept sealed because it was prejudicial. It was kept sealed because they didn't want the images of 3 drunk white judges starting a violent brawl to get out there. They waited over 3 years before finally quietly releasing it, when it's old news and nobody will pay that much attention. But these are the crime stories that you don't hear about. And now you know why. Because this is how you manufacture racial myths. You have to curate information, censor it, hide it, like say they did with Laquan McDonald. This one came to light, but we all know this is only the tip of a very large, very ugly iceberg. These judges are the kind of people who the white media's news reports and legal dramas try to paint as being paragons of virtue. These are the people the white media wants to convince you are objective arbiters of justice, fair-dealing, decent people who we should all look up to and respect and aspire to be like. But this story shows who and what they really are, what they've always been. And while it may be a shock to the dominant society, for black people, it's no surprise at all. And they tell us that we owe it to the Sabrina Bells and the Andrew Adams and the Brad Jacobs to respect them just because? Well, when it comes to who gets my respect, I'll be the judge of that. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones that the white corporate media chooses to show to you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Wesley Monroe, Take the Wheel Mobile, Murad Campbell, Dondi Waddell, and Isaac. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.